Hey everyone, and welcome back to Logan's Voice. I'm Doug, Logan's dad. If you're new here, I just want to say thank you for showing up. This podcast is my way of continuing a conversation my son Logan never got to finish. He died from fentanyl poisoning in May of 2020, a mistake that can never be undone. But his story, his voice still matters, and now I carry it forward. Every episode is a small act of remembrance, resistance, and truth telling because the stigma around addiction is killing people. The silence is killing people. And Logan, I know my son would want me to speak up, especially if it could save someone else. He'd say, Dad, do what you can to get the word out. So that's what I'm doing. Today, we're going to talk about something that isn't always well understood, even by those of us who've lost someone. And that's how opioids actually change the brain. Addiction is often seen as a choice or a weakness, but the science tells a very different story. So, in this episode, we're going to walk through what happens in the brain when someone starts using opioids, how the initial high rewires the reward system, and why it becomes so hard, even terrifying, to stop. We'll talk about dependence, relapse, and what recovery really requires from both the person and their support system. This isn't just science, it's humanity, it's understanding. And I believe that the more we know, the more compassion we're able to show. So let's dive in. Let's start with the basics. What actually happens when someone takes an opioid? Whether it's a prescription painkiller like Oxycontin or illicit street drug like heroin or fentanyl, opioids all work in a similar way. They attach to special receptors in the brain and spinal cord called opioid receptors, and they block pain. That's why they're so effective in medicine. But along with that pain relief comes something else, a powerful rush of dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical. Dopamine is part of our brain's reward system. It's released when we do things that feel good, like eating, laughing, hugging someone, or achieving something meaningful. It's the brain's way of saying, that felt good, do it again. But opioids hijack that system. They flood the brain with an unnatural surge of dopamine, way more than you'd get from a hug or a slice of pizza. And the brain over time adapts. It starts to reduce its own natural dopamine production because it thinks it doesn't need it anymore. The more someone uses, the more the brain rewires itself to rely on the drug, and not just for pleasure, but eventually just to feel normal. At first, someone might take a pill or a hit and feel euphoric, relaxed, pain-free. But that feeling fades, and they're left chasing something they can never quite recreate. The highs get lower, the lows get worse, and eventually it stops being about feeling good and starts being about avoiding the pains of withdrawal. The cravings become compulsive, and the brain starts telling the body, you need this to survive. This is where the cycle starts. And for many people, like Logan, that first encounter with an opioid might not seem like a big deal. It might even come from a prescription, or a friend, or a party. But that one moment, that first dopamine flood, can set off a cascade of changes that are incredibly hard to reverse. And here's the hardest part to accept. It's not about weakness. It's biology. It's the brain doing what it's designed to do, seeking reward, avoiding pain, but under the influence of a substance that takes control of that system. So if you've ever wondered why someone just can't stop, even when it's destroying their life, the answer isn't simple, but it starts here, in the reward system of the brain that has been hijacked. One of the biggest misunderstandings around substance use is the difference between dependence and addiction. People often use the terms interchangeably, but they're not quite the same thing. And it matters. Dependence is what happens when your body gets used to a substance. If someone takes opioids regularly, even as prescribed by a doctor, their body can become physically dependent. That means if they stop suddenly, they'll go through withdrawals. It's miserable. We're talking chills, vomiting, muscle pain, anxiety, sweating, insomnia, like the worst flu you've ever had, but deeper. Like your body is screaming out for relief. But physical dependence alone doesn't mean someone is addicted. Addiction is more complex. It's not just about the body, it's about compulsion. Addiction is when a person continues using a substance even though it's causing harm to their health, to their relationships, to their job, their future. It's when they want to stop but can't. And that's where opioids are especially cruel. The brain develops a tolerance, meaning that it takes more of the drug to get the same effect. But as tolerance rises, so does risk. The line between a high and a fatal overdose becomes razor thin, especially with synthetic opioids like illicit fentanyl involved. Logan experienced all of this: the chasing, the withdrawal, the trying to quit, the shame, the craving. There were stretches where he was doing better and moments when we thought he was turning a corner. But addiction has a way of lying to everyone, especially to the person going through it. This is where judgment needs to stop and education needs to start. You can't love someone out of addiction. You can't threaten them or guilt them or snap them out of it. Because what you're dealing with isn't a bad attitude. You're dealing with a brain that has been rewired by a drug to survive on that drug. And that's why relapse is so common. Not because people don't want to get better, but because they're fighting a war in their own mind and body, a war that requires compassion, structure, treatment, and a community that doesn't give up. By the time someone has been using opioids regularly, especially over months or years, their brain has changed in ways that don't just go away overnight. And I mean physically changed. MRI scans of people with opioid use disorder show that key areas of the brain are literally altered. The prefrontal cortex, which helps with decision making, judgment, and impulse control, often shows reduced activity. That's the part of the brain that says, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. But when it's impaired, that voice gets quieter and the craving gets louder. Another area that takes a hit is the amygdala, which regulates emotions like fear and anxiety. Long-term opioid use can make emotional regulation difficult. That means people can become more reactive, more depressed, more anxious, and that emotional pain just fuels the urge to use again. There's also the hippocampus, which helps with memory. That's why some people in active addiction seem to be forgetful or foggy. It's not just the drugs, it's the actual structure of the brain being impacted. All of this adds up to the difficult truth. Even after someone stops using, their brain doesn't bounce back right away. For some, it takes months, even years to heal. And during that time, they're incredibly vulnerable to relapse. Not because they don't care or aren't trying, but because their brain is still healing. It's still fighting to find balance again. And that's why recovery isn't just about detox. Yeah, detox gets the drugs out of your system, but it doesn't fix the brain. It's like drying off after falling in a river and thinking you've learned to swim. Detox is the beginning, not the cure. And this is also why people who are in recovery often feel like they're white knuckling it, barely holding on. And why so many relapse even after weeks or months clean. It's not that they're failing, it's that their brain is still rewiring itself. And rewiring takes time, consistency, and often support that extends far beyond any 30-day program. So when someone you love says they're struggling weeks after getting clean, believe them. Their brain is still under construction, and what they need most is patience, support, and a reminder that healing isn't linear. It's a process. Let's talk about one of the most damaging lies surrounding addiction. If they really wanted to stop, they would. I used to think that way too, before I truly understood what Logan was up against, before I saw up close what addiction really does to a person. We've been told for generations that addiction is a moral failing, that it's about bad choices or weak character. But neuroscience tells us a different story. Addiction is a chronic brain disease that affects judgment, behavior, motivation, and self-control. That doesn't mean people don't have any responsibility, but it means that simple wanting it isn't enough. Imagine asking somebody with Alzheimer's to just try harder to remember, or someone having a seizure, just will it to stop. You'd never say that because we understand those are medical conditions. Addiction should be no different. When someone becomes addicted to opioids, the area of the brain responsible for impulse control, decision making, and stress regulation get hijacked. And when that person tries to stop, their brain panics. It says, we need that drug to survive. That panic isn't imaginary, it's chemical, it's physiological. And that's why shame doesn't help. It never has. Telling someone they're a screw up or selfish or weak just reinforces the hopelessness that addiction thrives on. Stigma is not just cruel, it's deadly. It silences people, it keeps them from asking for help, and it turns addiction into something you hide instead of something you fight. And when people feel ashamed, isolated, or judged, they're less likely to get the support they need. Logan wasn't weak. He was in pain. And the world told him to tough it out, man up, and figure it out on his own. But what he needed was treatment, patience, connection, and understanding, long before the system ever showed up to punish him. I'm not saying recovery is easy. It's hard as hell. But it's not about flipping a switch or finding some magical burst of willpower. It's about retraining the brain, rebuilding trust, finding purpose, and learning how to live again, one small, painful, courageous step at a time. If we really want to help people recover, we have to stop treating addiction like a character flaw and start treating it like the chronic, relapsing, treatable medical condition that it is. And here's the good news, and we need some good news. The brain can heal, but healing isn't instant. It doesn't happen in a week or even a month. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes the right kind of support. One of the most powerful things we've learned about the brain in recent years is something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, to form new connections, to adapt. Even after damage from long-term opioid use, the brain can slowly begin to rebuild, especially when someone is in a safe, structured environment that has access to resources. So what helps? There's medication-assisted treatment. This includes medications like Suboxone or methadone, which can reduce cravings and withdrawal symptoms. These aren't just substituting one drug for another. They're stabilizing tools that allow people to function, think clearly, and build a life while the brain heals. Research shows that medication-assisted treatment dramatically lowers the risk of fatal overdose and increases retention in recovery programs. And then there's counseling and therapy. Behavioral therapy, trauma-informed care, and cognitive behavioral therapy are powerful tools. They help people identify triggers, change patterns, and process the pain that often drives substance use. Therapy gives people a safe space to talk about guilt, grief, and shame without judgment. And then there's community and connection. Recovery thrives in relationships, whether it's peer support, 12-step groups, non 12-step groups, or a supportive family. Connection is one of the strongest predictors of success. People in recovery need to know they're not alone. They need to feel seen and valued, not just for who they were in addiction, but for who they're becoming in their recovery. And purpose. I've seen this one over and over again. When someone in recovery finds purpose, whether it's a job, a pet, a relationship, advocacy work, or even just showing up for their own kids, it lights a spark. That purpose becomes stronger than the pull of the drug. It gives them a reason to fight through the tough days. And then we need to talk about developing healthy habits. Exercise, nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, all of it matters. Movement and fresh air help regulate mood. A consistent routine helps rebuild trust in yourself. Even small habits like journaling, walking, eating regular meals can feel like a lifeline during early recovery. I think about Logan all the time, about what might have helped him more, about how many kids out there right now are just one moment, one choice, one pill away from a lifetime of struggle, or worse, a life cut short. And that's why we have to talk about this. Recovery isn't just possible, it's real. I've seen it. I've met people who were deep in it, and now years clean, thriving, parenting, mentoring others. But it doesn't happen alone. It happens when we meet people with empathy, resources, and the belief that healing is not possible. It's worth fighting for. As we wrap up today's episode of Logan's Voice, I just want to say this. If you or someone you love is struggling with opioid use, you are not alone. And you're not beyond help. Addiction changes the brain, yes, but healing is possible. It just takes time. It takes the right support, and most importantly, it takes compassion from others and from yourself. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I am a grieving father who lost his son to fentanyl poisoning, a single moment that changed everything. Logan didn't want to die. He made a mistake that can't be undone. But I believe with my whole heart that if he could speak today, he'd say, "Dad, get the word out. Tell the truth. Help somebody else not make the mistake I did." That's why I do this podcast. That's why I keep showing up. Because I couldn't save Logan, but maybe these conversations can help save someone else. Maybe it can help a parent ask a hard question. Maybe it can help a teen pause before they take that pill. Maybe it can help someone in recovery keep going. If this episode moved you, please share it, post it, text it to someone who needs to hear it. Let's push back against the silence and shame and the misinformation together. And if you're looking to learn more, find support, or connect with others, try hopemovementcoalition.com and cwc.ngo. Websites like the Partnership to End Addiction are chock full of helpful information. Or even Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership has great resources available. They do real work in prevention, education, and advocacy. And if you're grieving the loss of someone to overdose, please know you are welcome here. This space is for you too. We don't have to carry this pain alone. Until next time, I'm Doug, Logan's dad. I am Logan's voice. I am Logan's dad, and I will not remain silent.